It is true, though.
A very, very special Gentleman's Dojo.
Very special.
We are so excited today because I have to my left Gary Cannon, as usual,
Hello.
from Detroit, Michigan, and joining us today in studio, one of my favorites, great comic, great podcast himself, Mr. Kevin Christy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really funny comic.
Awesome comic. And today we will be interviewing Jim Lee, probably my favorite artist, DC Comics, also Korean, which is awesome.
Yeah.
He came to the set of Sullivan & Son. He is an immense talent, and we are going to interview him in just a few minutes, but we thought
He's a legend!
He's a legend, that's right.
By the way, this is the first time in our little kind of thingy that we've had a guest sit in on our, like a guest co-host, join us to interview our guest. And Kevin's got a great show on this network as well, which
Occasionally
I love.
awesome. He's one half. Oh,
Love
Gary. He didn't even know who you were.
No,
Let's be honest with you.
But you cover that really well. And I have to admire someone who can be like, I don't know anything about you, and then as soon as it comes on, just like, great guy. Like, that's that Regis Philbin gear where he's
I know how
like,
to turn
this
it up.
next guy's got a parrot that makes casserole, and he's excited about it. That's impressive.
Love this guy.
So Jim Lee,
KC.
obviously, he is a huge artist at
Huge.
DC. Yeah, he had his own company, Image, for a while. Came back to DC. Is one of the head honchos. He illustrates for Justice League. He's done Hush, Superman, just everything. He's unbelievable, and you know as much as I do, if not more, because you are. And by the way, Kevin, so I can introduce Kevin properly. Kevin did the artwork for Champion, my hour special. It's on Netflix right now.
Right.
Anytime I bring it up, Gary uses
Right.
any opportunity. When he uses the bathroom, he says, "Oh, I have to go take a Champion." So,
Christ.
but thank you so much. And
So
I
your
said,
artwork is seen in 4 homes around the country right now, just
You
so
are the
you know.
worst.
Yeah.
An absolute worst.
Just so you know that
Right.
hard work that you put into that.
but
is seen
Kevin's
in
done
4
artwork for
homes.
The Strokes. Who else have you done artwork for?
The Kings of Leon. I've worked for the New York Times Magazine.
This guy's done it all. I've been a fan for a while too.
Cannon.
KC. Casey.
Would you shut the
You know what's so weird? It feels the same as if he meant it. Like I'm being tricked by your delivery. Did you take like a public speaking course? Like
This guy.
I feel no. It's like when someone says "I love you" in a scene. You feel it, kind of. You know they don't, but you feel it.
His best acting is not in front of the camera.
I do.
You're correct.
I do. I'm throwing a little bit because I see your beard and I'm reminded of my ex-girlfriend.
Right.
So it just throws me a little bit.
Right.
That joke bombed.
Yeah. You might
So
wanna
You can have
rewrite
it.
that
before
one.
Jim calls in, I can have it. Do you guys want to discuss any of your, as you're growing up, comics you loved, comics you got into? Are you still into comics? Kevin, I know it's probably an easy.
I mean, I got
question for you.
into comics. More or less because of Jim Lee. Like Jim Lee, the first X-Men I bought was a Jim Lee X-Men, and that's
Right.
what kept me buying it was his art because it was crazy to me. I was
Yeah.
probably 12 or 13, and I got like $40 from my dad. I went to a comic book store and I bought.
That's a healthy sum to go to a comic book store.
I had
by the way.
well I got paid for like my dad was a school teacher and my job for like 8 hours was to watch a bunch of like shitty kids while their parents were at like all these teachers had to go to a conference on a Saturday, so I
Right.
stayed in a room and made sure no one died, and I got $40 and I walked to the comic book store and I bought $40 worth of comics, which was
Nice.
like I got like a graphic
You're like Richie
novel.
Rich.
Yeah, I walked in like, shut the doors, bitches. Like, it was a lot of money. And I bought a bunch of X-Men, and this is when Jim Lee had probably just started penciling them. And I mean, they were like I couldn't wrap my head around someone being able to draw that well.
Right.
And I didn't understand what inking was in penciling, so in my mind, it was basically all him. And they were, stunning isn't even the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like at that point, around that time, he did this gatefold thing with X-Men where you connected the covers,
Oh, right, yeah.
and it was like a X-Men reboot.
Like
and-
X-Men Volume 2,
Yeah, it
which
was-
he has the best-selling comic of all time.
Yeah, and
For
you
that-
could connect
the variant
covers,
covers, yeah.
Which to my head, I was like, wait, how do you
It's a
make
puzzle, and
Yeah,
it
so you took
becomes a-
different pieces of paper and you put them next to each other. And you connect that shit. Like it was, I couldn't his drawing ability is. I mean, honestly, it's of like a Renaissance artist level. It's just put into comic books.
Right.
His ability as an artist is incredible, and just his compositional skills, mind blowing. Like he's one of the best ever. It's not. He is like an actual legend.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I mean, I made a list of things that I learned to
yeah,
draw.
absolutely. Well, I'm excited to ask too. Gary, how about you? Were you into comics as a?
Well, no, not really. I mean, let me just say, I played a lot of sports in high school, so I didn't really have time,
Canon.
to do that. I was getting laid a lot, and let me just say this, boys.
Speaking of imagination,
I was into
creativity.
having his own. This guy's got a good podcast, right here on this network. Fuck you, Nerdist. You're not getting it. You're not getting those 4 downloads. Listen, no. I didn't really know about the whole comic book world, but I did remember meeting Jim when we were at that club in San Diego. He came to
our show. We did the Sullivan Son
Yeah,
tour. He came out with his wife.
Came out with his wife when we were there. It was the night before 4th of July.
Yeah.
And I remember we all drove down there, and that was my first time I met him. He didn't come to I wasn't there the night that he was there at Sullivan Son, but I just remember after meeting him trying to figure out like in the bigger picture who he was and all this other stuff. And I remember doing research on him because I remember he was such a big hero to you.
Yeah.
So I remember going back and looking at it, and I was like, oh, holy shit, this guy is such a big deal in the whole comic book community. It was just crazy to me because I just wasn't. I mean, listen, Kevin knows, and I mean, there's a guy named Vito who knows so much stuff about it.
Right.
But I mean, for you guys, I mean, that guy's just a huge deal. And when I finally got to meet him that night, it kind of became clear to me who he was. And
I think every decade you have your Gretzky or your Montana or your Brady, and I think he's definitely. I mean, he is.
He falls. I mean, when you
if
you start making the list of greatest comic book artists of all time, he's on the list.
Yeah.
He falls into that list of like Frank Frazetta and Stan Lee and like all those people. It's like during his generation, he's definitely one of those guys for sure.
Yeah.
It's not even he's first ballot Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's no question. I got into it when I was like in 7th or 8th grade. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and they had this great comic book store called Ides, and we used to leave the suburbs, which was the North Hills area, and go into the city, take the bus down there, and I didn't have $40. I had like four bucks or whatever.
I only had $40 that one
time. That one time, I know,
but stretched it.
But I got into Todd McFarlane when he was illustrating for the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And his Gray Hulk was like,
yeah,
what the and like his spider web when Spider-Man would shoot the web, like the web would shoot out, but then there were like spirals around the web, and it was like, this is the coolest shit ever.
Yeah,
it was
Todd
just sick.
McFarlane's hands were really something. But then the difference I always found, the thing with Jim Lee was whereas a lot of, especially in the 90s, a lot of artists I thought were getting bogged down in style. And so the composition wasn't as good. It was just all about like, look at the gnarly style you have,
right?
But his anatomy was so good. It made all the characters look tougher because they looked more realistic, even though they were like fantastical characters.
Right.
They looked more like closer to human beings. So they looked like you were like, that person could kind of exist. Like Wolverine, obviously, like he made sure Wolverine looked like short and stocky. And you were like, okay, I can kind of imagine that guy actually existing, which inadvertently made him way tougher looking.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. I think it's look, when you see like Alex Ross's, it's like, oh, that's probably what he'd look like.
Yeah.
When you see that Superman, circa 1950s kind of look, you're like, oh my God, that's as realistic, I guess, as you would get because he's painting it.
But Alex Ross is using photo reference, whereas Jim Lee wasn't. That's what's so terrifying.
Yeah,
he was making this shit up. And look, I can make up people. They're not as good as his. Like, he has a weird. It's probably like basically a photographic memory,
right?
To where he just knows exactly what shit should look like. So when he's drawing, he's just like he's almost regurgitating photographs in his brain,
as opposed to Ross, who's looking at a
he
still
shoots
picture.
Like
and
I've
then,
seen it. Yeah, I've seen some of his models. He shoots photoscrap and kind of composes them. Ross is also stunning. Like crazy, but like it's a different gear, I think. And there's Alex Ross's comics. Because I remember when they were coming out, they'd take way longer to show up. Whereas Jim Lee was putting out comics.
Banging, yeah.
It's that like I met a guy in art school named Aaron Weisenfeld who worked for Image. And first of all, he was the same age as me, where I was like, how did you had a job in comic books already? And then he was going to art school. It was terrifying. But he was like, yeah, you got to do a page a day. And I was like, what? He's like, it's a really hard job.
Right.
You have to sit there all day. You have to crank out a really rad page every single solitary day. And it's not like a ton of money, but it's like it's like a legit like sit at your desk all-day job.
And not only just bang out, a page, but it's like, I mean, these sketches these days are so intricate. Because if you go in a comic book store nowadays, you just look down before you used to be able to go in, you used to spin that rack around,
Yeah.
and there were like 20 titles maybe, max.
Yeah.
And now you go in any store, and you just look down this long, like, grocery aisle, and for every even character you like now with Star Wars, they have Lando Calrissian, they have Chewbacca, they have Princess Leia, they have Darth Vader, and they have Shattered Empire, and they have Star Wars. And it's just like you can't go in and just get Star Wars now. You got to get the whole cachet, I guess.
Yeah.
Superman, how many titles does he have? Spider-Man, how many titles does he have? So you think about the vast array of all these different comics, how they were kind of in competition with each other. And then you see all the illustrations that are one-upping and style and all that stuff. And they're all popping, and it's just these gorgeous works of art.
And you're also you're not only competing with the comics on the racks, but you're also competing with the entirety of comic book history. Because very few comic book enthusiasts get into like one and don't start looking at old stuff.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at all the artists, and so I'm like, well, how are you in comparison to these people? Where are you in comparison to these artists?
Right.
So I can't. The pressure you must feel when you're like, all right, we're like, hey, you got the job of drawing Batman. You must be like, oh fuck my life. You're like, oh god. Or X-Men, or the people that have done it have been so good to where you're like, okay, I guess it's my turn. Like people are gonna judge. Like I really was judgmental about like, let me see your claws. How are your Wolverine claws? Because some people would draw some punk ass. Like Wolverine claws that didn't look that sharp, or didn't look like Jim Lee's.
They look like butter knives.
Well, they were like too wide at the end. Like they looked like swords, whereas like his were pointy and like had this like grit on them, like leftover blood. And you were like, dude, those are sweet. Like they just looked gnarlier. Like but at the same time, not like, oh god, look, like some guys would get, and I don't want to name names, but some artists would get too into the claws. Where they made him too gnarly, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I get that you're about the claw, but then it has this weird balloon arm. Like, you spend too much time on the claws.
I always felt bad in the movies when, like, Hugh Jackman is, like, pulling out his Wolverine claws, but they got sheared off, so it's the bones, like in the origin ones.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, Wolverine doesn't look that scary because it looks like he has, like, three ingrown fingernails just, like, jetting out. It's like, he's not tough now.
Yeah.
It looks awful.
Yeah.
You went to a bad Korean nail spa. You do that bit, don't you? Is that you, the nail spa bit? Or no, that's Angela Johnson. But what you were saying, you're talking about the guy. Jesus. He's good, too.
You were talking about the guy. He's good, too.
That was I'm gonna go grab lunch while you two are jerking each other off.
You know the boom goes the dynamite clip? You remember you're getting a call. Okay, shut your fucking mouth.
Yeah, you watch your mouth, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Gentleman's Dojo. He is under the weather. We still appreciate him bucking up. Mr. Jim Lee, everybody.
Hello.
Jim, how you doing, bud?
Hey. How you guys doing?
Good. Thank you so much for calling in. I know you're sick. We still appreciate you taking the time. We're not going to keep you too long, but Kevin Christy is to my left. He did he's done so much artwork for like rock bands, Kings of Leon, The Strokes. He did my cover art for Champion for my last special, and he's a huge comic fan. So we have him joining us as well as Gary Cannon, and as an artist that Kevin is, we thought we'd let him kick it off with the first question here.
Sure. First of all, thank you for doing this. Second of all, you're a legend, obviously. You know that probably.
Every morning when I wake up, I go,
yeah.
I mean, I honestly hope you do that every day. Like my question is, do you have a sense of like the ripple effect that your drawings have had on just like the drawing landscape of like probably the world in general, that like how many people have probably decided to start drawing or gotten really psyched about drawing stuff because of looking at your art?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because when I go to conventions or store signings, a lot of fans come up and say, hey, I got into the arts, or I'm an art director now, or I work at this video company because of the comic books that you drew back in the day. So that's actually the highest compliment, I think anyone can receive. It's not so much that you're this legend or something, but that the work you did had some effect on a kid and kind of, opened their eyes towards, maybe a destiny or an occupation they didn't necessarily envision before. Because that's certainly what comics did for me. When we moved to the United States, there weren't these big CGI movies. I mean, comics were the only place you could find this kind of level of action and adventure, and it really, when we came here to America, I was born in Korea. I didn't know any English, and I'm pretty much 100% sure that comics was a gateway drug for me to kind of learn the language, so I could understand what all these stories were that I was buying at the time. So
classic Asian, you don't watch TV, you read. Very nice work, Jim.
Yes.
No, I made a list of things that
my God, Kevin does have a Christmas list here.
I made a list of things I learned to draw by copying your comics. I'm going to read it really quick. Wolverine, X-Men type, biceps, triceps, hands, fists, claws, laser beams, perspective via Cyclops' laser, eyes, eyebrows, wrinkled foreheads because of death blow, boobs, butts, male and female butts, abs, hair, Batman's head and cape, and the bat symbol. So,
dude, that's an amazing list. I every time you mention one, I saw the visual, male, female butts, all that flashed in my eyes. It's amazing.
I was waiting to hear male bulge.
Yeah,
Didn't hear that.
Yeah.
I'm doing that more now than I used to. But,
it's a different time. It's a
just for you
different
guys.
time.
You got to get all the audiences. Jim, I want to ask you as a comic, on behalf of all three comedians here, they always say it takes you 10 years to develop your voice as a comedian. And you go down the line and you say Aziz, you know his voice. You say Larry the Cable Guy, you know his voice. As an artist, when did you discern your voice as an artist? When did you know that you have the Jim Lee look or the Jim Lee artistry where anybody could go into a comic book store nowadays and look at the cover of Justice League or any one of the titles that you've worked on and go, oh, that's Jim Lee? When did you discover your voice?
Wow. That's a good question, man. I think the style I have, though, is really the summation of all the guys I loved growing up. But there was definitely a moment, I think I just started working on the X-Men, where I was still looking at a lot of my influences, like pulling out the comics I loved and like, oh, here's this great shot. I can use this for reference, or here's some inspiration for this splash page or this cover. And I realized if I just did that, I would always be known as sort of the clone or the best guy that kind of did this other person's style. So I made a very conscious effort at one point. It must have been in the late 80s, very early 90s, where I just put away all my comics, all my reference, and just kind of said, well, there's got to be some inner style that's just me. Let it come forth. I know it's influenced by all these other guys, all these other artists, but let me decide as I'm drawing. There's no more crutches, so to speak. And out of that came, I think, the style that people kind of recognize as being mine in the 90s. But even then, I was very aware of the fact that a lot of artists kind of fall in this trap where their styles never evolve and change. And not that mine has changed dramatically, but over the decades, I've looked at other people that have kind of come onto the scene and kind of made a splash. And so I always try to kind of open myself to other influences and allow that stuff to inform my work, so that even when I'm drawing now, it's slightly different proportions. I'm using less cross-hatching, a lot of experimenting more with like brushes and things like that. So just you gotta make sure that you're open to new influences. Otherwise, that's the death knell for any artist. Is really once you've established the style you guys are talking about, that
right.
These comedians or artists, whoever, they can't stop there. I mean, especially when you've hit success with it, because that's the ultimate trap, right? Is that you become trapped by the success, and you get scared to kind of evolve and change, and therein lies the problem.
I noticed, at least from my perspective, a lot of your use of like light has changed over the years. Whereas like the early X-Men stuff was a lot about musculature, whereas now there's a lot more like drama, I would say, or in like your use of light and shadow and stuff like that.
For sure, yeah. Trying to always mess around with lighting. Even proportions is a big thing. I did this cover. It was a Flash anniversary where the Flash appeared in all these other covers, and I drew basically an homage to a cover I drew where Superman was kind of choking Batman's neck, and the Flash kind of shows up in the background. He's planting like these peace flowers in everyone's ears. I'm not sure exactly what the point of the cover was, but when I drew it, I found the original copy of the original cover, and I traced it as a starting point. Said, wow, my proportions are so different. And I draw characters a little longer, not as stout and blocky, and then even like the lighting that you're talking about, try to, again, you're learning new things every day, every year, and you just add them to your repertoire so that you're not necessarily repeating yourself, even if you are picking some similar angles or covers that kind of people have seen before. There's so many different ways you can light things and render them, and even the proportions, like I was talking about. All those things are very subtle things that people don't realize they're seeing when they look at the image, but has a very profound kind of impact on their enjoyment of it.
Yeah, they seem like small things, but even like putting combat boot treads on Batman's boots.
Yeah, that's
like
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
Like it's totally different, and it makes you think of him differently.
And when you have to when you make that commitment to putting the treads on the boot, then when you go down the line, are you like by page 48, you're like, God, why did I put
Why?
Why did I do this to myself? Because I had to draw all the treads.
Yeah.
Yes. There are a lot of those moments. When we launched the new 52, I added a lot more detail onto the Flash's costume, Superman's costume, Batman, and certainly when I was drawing all those characters in Justice League by the third issue or so. You're like going, what a numbskull. It's like there's a reason why these costumes are simple. It's because they had to draw them over and over.
Right.
In video games, they can create super complicated costumes because they just create it once and boom, they can use it over and over throughout the game. But I feel like, and the funny thing is, when I'm drawing those treads on that I didn't really realize that that's what people would pick up on. That's the funny thing about working in isolation. You're just drawing that because, like, hey, I don't want Batman to slip on rainy rooftops.
Yeah.
Gotham.
Like he can
But I
run
was
now.
going, like,
He
these
runs.
loafer soles, like, how does that work? Because they're slippery as hell, right? So it's like, oh, okay, I'll create some treads, and then you create it there, and then you go, oh, I got to be consistent. So you keep going back and forth, and and then that's what people kind of pick up on. And the funny thing is, really was an afterthought, just kind of as you're drawing the image, like, oh, I can, add this bit of realism there. So
It really changes the whole. But it's interesting. Something that small can change the whole thing. Where you're like, oh, he's tougher. Like, and he can run on wet street. Whereas before, you're like, I don't buy this running. Like,
right,
it's too,
exactly.
You're like with those little booties. There were booties before, and now you're like, oh, they're boots.
Right.
It's
So
like
they
Bryce.
were literally the soles of like loafers and stuff, like
Yeah.
dress shoes back in the 70s and 80s. And that's the one thing I remember. One of my big heroes was Neil Adams, and he drew everything so realistically. But then the shoes, I was like, wait, these shoes are slippery because I have such shoes. Not just on rainy rooftops, but anyway.
I got to ask you, how is, if you go in any, you go down the street here in Hollywood, magazine stands used to be all over the place when I first moved here, and now they're all vacated, they're all gone, and they always talk about the decline of print, the decline of the newspaper. It seems like comics is the one industry where it really hasn't affected. Has the decline in sales of print affected comics at all? Or because I go to comic book store on Wednesday, it's jam packed, and it seems like comics are like sports on cable, where they talk about the decline of ratings on television these days, but sports events will be the one that's impervious. Are comics impervious to the decline of sales? Is that something that you would?
I think the overall number might have come down, but because comics are pricier now or more expensive than they were years ago, the total number of dollars is probably more robust or as healthy as ever.
Mm-hmm.
Digital is a part of that as well. But yeah, I mean, when we launched the New 52 4 years ago, we saw huge spikes, double digits in print and triple digits in digital. So that was pretty unusual, given that most of the print business around us were disappearing or trading back. But I think partly, one, like we're not like magazines, we're not run by advertising. I mean, we have some in there, but it's really the sales that provide all our revenue. And then we have the benefit of all these amazing movies and TV shows that has really just elevated the superhero mythology into the zeitgeist, so that, I mean, everyone knows who these characters are, and everyone's wearing T-shirts, and everyone's got these tattoos, and so that's like amazing publicity for what we do. That said, I think we could do a better job of converting the people that love the games and the TV shows and movies, and get them into the comic goodness. But I think most people, like, what's cool about comics is if you're really into these characters, you know that this comics was the source of inspiration, and all the stuff you're seeing on the screen started somewhere in a story, and maybe they're mashups or amalgamations of different stories. But it's cool to go back and be the nerd of nerds who can say, hey, that's from issue 221, and that blue thread is from Batman Hush, and someone's ringing the doorbell here at the house. So anyway,
it's impressive doorbell.
So it's great. I mean, things are going really well, and obviously we have Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, and anytime the trailers drop, we see huge spikes in sales of the underlying print material. We saw a huge spike in Preacher sales just from the trailer that
on AMC, I think, right?
Dead. Yeah, so it's been going really great.
I mean, is there a better time to be involved in comics than right now? Prior to maybe World War II, when the comics were everywhere and it was so popular, but now with the impact of, like you said, film and TV and all that stuff, I mean, comics have never been bigger. Is along the pantheon of the decades that comics have been part of our lives. Is there ever been a better time?
Yeah, maybe the early '90s when print sales were crazy through the roof. Certainly for comic book creators who are making royalties off those sales.
Right.
But no, this really is the golden age because so much. If you love this stuff, the technology and the money's there now to bring these to life in ways that just were impossible before, or just were very cheesily done before, and now you can really see these characters brought to life. So it's incredible. In fact, I think there's more stuff than you could possibly consume at this point if you're a superhero fan, right? I mean, just the stuff on TV alone is so many hours of the week, and then the comic books on top of it, and the video games on top of that. So yeah, I think it's definitely the golden age. And the fact that my parents now know what I do for a living, it's a big bonus. Like, they go, that's what you were spending all that time in your room for. We just thought you were really strange.
Because you gave yourself, you were studying medicine, you went to Princeton, you studied psychology, you gave yourself a year. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at Princeton, I was a psychology major. There was no pre-med major, but I took all my prerequisites. I took my MCATs and everything. I had my interviews, all my recommendations. But I told my parents, like, look, hey, I'm really interested in doing this thing that you know nothing about, comics, that no one knows anything about. But it's got a big future. Someday there are going to be these amazing movies and TV shows, and you'll care then. But for now, let me move in with you guys. And so I said, So the deal was, I'd give myself a year. Maybe I don't know if I ever expressed that to them, but I certainly told myself that. So I just had a sense of urgency. And in talking to other comic book creators, everyone has a different origin story, but sometimes it took 5 or 7 years. I don't know if I could have emotionally kind of weathered that. I would like to think I could, but it's tricky.
I heard a story that when I got into Art Center, I heard this story that Brad Pitt had been accepted to Art Center as an illustration major and then decided to try acting for a year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I had been told. I don't know how true that is. Or it was like environmental design. He was like, I'm going to give this acting thing a try.
Sure, yeah.
So you're the Korean Brad Pitt of comic book art. Welcome.
We hear about, like Jim,
You're making me cough.
He goes to Princeton. He's this talented artist. He's a very, very Korean by going to Princeton. It's like I went to Kent State University. I went to a state school. I just performed at a Mexican restaurant last night for 12 people. Jim, you make me want to sue my parents. It's not fair and it is not right. Now, you also wrestled, though, back in the day. I remember you telling me that, right?
Yeah,
were you in a wrestling team or something?
I wrestled in high school and maybe a year in college. Yeah, very sadomasochistic. I can't even say the word. That was a very unique period of my life because it is a grueling, tough sport. I don't even know why people get into it, but for some reason it struck a chord in me, like that you would basically lose weight, run yourself ragged, getting into shape, and then go on the mat and have some other guy like pound on you if you weren't up to the task of pounding on him. And so, yeah, were you guys all wrestlers, or maybe you're dabbling in wrestling now? I don't know. What's the question here?
I think had you come in today, we were going to kind of grease up and then all four of us wrestle each other, but that plan fell through. I'm sorry about that.
I was on
the mud pit is sitting here for no reason.
Yeah, real waste, especially during a drought. The fact that we wasted all that water. I was on the tennis team, which is actually really Korean in California.
Yeah.
Wow, you said that out loud.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Jim,
I was the only white guy.
I got to ask you, you make your money with your hands. Do you avoid certain things? Do you avoid like thumb wrestling or doing that aliens thing where they do that knife trick?
Only
Is that you like
with my left hand? No, I don't. But there was only one time in my career that I was very concerned, like aware that like, oh, if I break my hand or something happens, I'm really screwed. And that was in the early '90s when I was at Marvel. And I got an assignment to do X-Men #1, and we knew we were going to do 5 covers, and X-Force had sold like 3.5 million copies, and Spider-Man had sold like 2 million copies.
Jeez.
And they were thinking that we were going to sell like 5 million plus or something like that. Or maybe X-Force sold 5 million at the time, and Spider-Man sold 3 million.
A lot of those
some crazy numbers. So I knew that I got this gig, or whatever, and but I had to draw it still, right? But I knew like if something happened. So I'm very conscious of reaching out to doors that swing both ways with my right hand, because if there's some guy on the other side and they're running full sprint, because I've done that, where they slam the door, like I just imagine my fingers getting like pushed back into my palm, right? And then like if I ran a yellow light, I put my hand like near my head, like like off the steering wheel. Like I don't know, it's weird. Yeah, like I don't know what that would do. Like, but the idea that it wouldn't get mangled if some car hit me. Like I thought
keep
about
it away from the windshield.
I gotta stop doing that because like let's stay focused on this. You gotta make sure that you draw at least the first issue.
Jim should always wear those like hand braces, like the waitresses at IHOP.
Yeah.
Constantly wearing.
I have not, but I've worn back braces and shoulder. I mean, it's
just constantly wearing those to bed.
I would have still drawn. I would have drawn with my left hand or with my mouth. I've seen documentaries where people. I mean, it's the talent, right, is supposedly in your head. It's just that you're most used to drawing or expressing your thoughts with your right hand because of the hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, it's really your eyes and your brain.
And now with you being at DC, you're on the precipice of unfolding and seeing all the characters you draw, on a daily basis come to life on the big screen. What is it like to know, and I'm sure you know the storylines, I'm sure you've seen maybe some cuts of things, but what is it like as an artist to see the things you do on a daily basis that all of a sudden, as every red-blooded American man is so excited to see Batman versus Superman and see what unfolds, as we've heard, with the Justice League being rolled out. You're right there in the midst of all that. How do you feel about seeing all your characters come to life and knowing in 120 minutes they're encapsulating everything you do and provide for us on a monthly basis?
It's an awesome honor. I mean, I think of the characters I created, Hush was was in a bunch of the video games, Batman, Lego, and Arkham. And I think he even showed up on the Gotham TV show. Excuse me. So, and then I think Gambit is theoretically coming out as a movie sometime in the next year or two. A character I co-created at Marvel with Chris Claremont. So it's cool. I mean, but at the same time, I didn't get into comics to see that adaptation come to life. The fun I had again, decisions I made a long time ago, like, am I going to just do this, or is this a gateway, or is this a stepping stone to directing or doing animation? And I said, no, this is, my love is comics. I love the storytelling. I love sitting down, physically drawing these stories. And I kind of decided then and there that's what I wanted to be, a comic book artist. That said, when you see it brought to life, it's amazing. I mean, how could it not? I mean, when you visualize this stuff, most of the time you've got it and you're pretty good in your head, like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like when this guy uses his powers, boom, you see it. But then sometimes, particularly in the video game space, they can go and do these special effects that are like almost three-dimensional, like these like runes. It's hard to describe, but verbally, but they're able to take what you draw in a 2D space and visualize it three-dimensionally, and then you add the sound in, and then like the ground shutter and all those other kind of cool things that you can't really express in 2D illustrations, and they bring it to life in different ways. And it's another facet. It's another way of enjoying it. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm as big a fan as anyone else. So it's amazing when you see the stuff brought to the big screen, and I'm thankful that it's able to touch and influence so many more people than just the print comics, because it's an easier medium, in my opinion, to kind of take in. It's more of a passive thing. You sit down and you go on this journey, this ride, because it's good for our core business. So yeah, I mean, how can you not be thankful? And it's really cool to see that stuff.
Nice.
Jim, you know what's crazy? For everything that you've done in this portfolio and this huge resume that you have, I know that I speak for comics. Obviously comics have, a goal of what they want and what would fulfill their career, whether it's like, playing Madison Square Garden or being on the Tonight Show, whatever that is. But what is it that you want to do that you haven't done yet? I mean, if there's anything, but what's out there that, that you would still love to accomplish if there was one thing?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. There's a bunch of stuff I've already done that, mostly involving my parents. Like, Steve was there. I met Steve. He was gracious enough to be the host for this Korean American magazine, and they kind of honored me at the end of the year. And so I had my parents there, and I was able to kind of, talk to them and kind of express how I felt about how their impact on me, and do that in a very public forum. And so that was really cool to have that kind of moment. People were all dressed up, right? So it was a shindig. And that was pretty cool, because I always feared that when I got into comics, like, there would never be a moment where they would either see that success in me, or that I would be able to thank them in a public way. I mean, like, comics was really an underground kind of business back then. The creators are fairly invisible. You didn't know where to find anyone. You didn't know how to communicate with these people. That's pre-internet, of course. So I just imagined that I would be literally living in a house, working in my bedroom, and that would be the extent of my career. And I was cool with that, because that was my passion, right? But there was all these other things I thought about that I thought, well, maybe this will never happen, kind of thing. So that was cool to do that. But beyond that, a lot of the stuff I have on my checklist really don't, hesitant to say this, but don't necessarily hinge upon the art side or the business side of it. So like having, a loving wife and the kids, and being able to make a living doing what I love. I mean, so those are all things I've accomplished.
The
so.
wife and kids must be sitting there.
Yeah,
that's why you
for sure. For sure. Absolutely.
Jim, tell us your answer when they leave.
It is critical. Look, if you're going to spend crazy hours working, you got to have someone with your back. And if you're going to have a family, you got to have someone that you can count on if you're not there or able to.
Well, Gary can't relate. He has 5 cats, I think.
Right. It's not the same thing. I've got a cat and 2 dogs. Nowhere close.
When you first hit like your first big check, or the money's rolling in, and you still have the mindset of like being like a starving artist, what was that first thing you spoiled yourself with, where you're like, you know what, it's Daddy's turn?
Wow. Probably I'm into cars, so I bought a Acura NSX back in the day. So that was like a big car. I was like 92, I think. Right?
That's awesome.
That was a hot car in 92?
It was a hot car. It rivaled the Ferrari. Put this quotation
like
around rivaled.
You could get a Viper back then?
And I think it was like 62,500 road check for it. And
in today's money, that's like $600,000. The
90s
were a depressed time.
Very close.
Steve just bought a Fiero.
Okay. Well,
Fieros look very similar. I like those too. I like those too. I'm not a snob. I like the funnest car I had before my daughter destroyed it. Total was a BMW 335 diesel, which had great low end torque, handled super well. And it was a lot of fun to drive.
Nice.
Hey, can I ask you? I want to ask you one more thing. So, hey, Jim, what advice would you have for somebody who's young, starting out, wants to be, just like you in that same situation? Like, when you're a comic and you're starting out, you can look at other people and say, that's what I want, that's how I want to get to it. There's open mics to go to. Same with a musician. But like, what advice would you have for somebody just starting out that wants to be where you are right now?
Yeah, that's great. Another great question. So when I started out, I just made up my idea of what it would take to get in. Like, I should draw samples. I should show them I could do the stuff that they hire people for. I started drawing like 24 pages, and then I would mail those off and say, that's a lot. Maybe I can just trim it down to 3, or 6. Or it kept getting smaller and smaller. Then I realized I just need to show them a snippet of. They don't need to see this 24-page, magnum opus kind of great story. They just need to know that I can draw and I can tell a story. And I would mail out like 20 packets at a time to all these small publishers, so I could find the addresses of their operations in the comics themselves. So those are really analog and very time-consuming. But I would say, looking at the business now, it's all internet, right?
Right.
You can now reach out to your favorite creators, your favorite editors, and probably say 8 times out of 10, certainly in comics because it's a pretty small business, make contact with them. And through deviantart.com, it's a great site to host artwork on. You can get your artwork shown to a pretty big audience. And then even if you were to get rejection from the publishers, you could just self-publish. You just either write your own stories or you find a like-minded person online or at a comic book shop that's got ideas, or a comedian that's got ideas and he's looking for time to kill, because, writing is writing. And at the end of the day, what I tell young people is just do it. Just create. Don't worry about getting paid for it right away, because you're not going to get paid for it. Go ahead and create a strip, and it's just like working out. Once you start doing it, you become stronger and better, and you learn from all your mistakes and your first attempts, and then eventually you get to the point where you're good, and either then you could self-publish or someone will hire you. I think we're pretty good as an industry at finding people that have ability and talent. If they want to work in comics, they will get hired. It's just the timing of it. I don't think there are people out there that have amazing talent that want to work in comics that aren't at this point. So that would be my advice.
Well, we're going to close this out by asking just 3 questions that fans have submitted us. And then we'll let you get on your way. But this first one is pretty interesting. From Azo Rivera, he asked, how has Superman and Batman managed to stay relevant after all these years?
Wow. So it's 76 years for Batman, 77 for Superman. I think the trick is the fact that they are created within a collaborative, shared universe, right? If it was one creator and they never shared those creations, who's to say where they would be? The fact that you basically had generations of some of the best comic book creators working on Batman, and they were basically adding to that mythology every decade. New costumes, new gadgets, new sidekicks, new mythologies, new villains. That's what keeps these characters fresh, and it keeps them timely, because everything that's created is going to reflect the era in which they were created, right? There was, back in the 40s, Superman fought Hitler and the Japanese, and in the 60s there was a lot of radioactive storylines where characters were getting powers from radioactivity. A lot of the weird kryptonites that emerged in mythology came during that era, because people didn't understand really the impact of radiation on people's physiology, and their mindset. So you saw that the whole Marvel universe is created on that, basically that fundamental kind of supposition that radiation can change you in ways. That's a big part of it. But I think that the key is that all these great, amazing creators, every generation, have kind of stood on the shoulders of the creators before them, who stood on the shoulders of the creators before them, and have kept this enterprise going forward. And I think also being first makes a big impact too. The fact that Batman was the first sort of gritty, dark character, and Superman was the first superhero. So those are the 2 biggies.
And this is from Alan Mattis. What was your favorite book or title to work on?
Oh, gosh. I would say All-Star Batman and Robin. Not everyone loves it as much as like Hush, but it was my chance to work with Frank Miller. And Frank, I was a senior in college in '86, and that's when Dark Knight Returns came out 30 years ago. Actually, next year, 30 years ago. And that was the book that kind of opened my eyes to the potential of the medium. I kind of got bored with comics when I was in college. There was all these other distractions, good distractions. But when I saw that book, I said, "Wow, this is so different from anything I read as a kid." Because it was, hand colored, and the binding was square bound, and then the narrative was just much more hard hitting and edgy, and felt more like art with a capital A, and that's what really inspired me to finally take the leap into comics, because it's something I'd thought about jumping into ever since I was like 12 years old. I just didn't know how to do it, or couldn't pull the trigger and kind of go against my parents' wishes and do something besides going into medicine.
Right. This one is from Carlos Roberto Franco. What is the hardest project you've had to work on?
Probably I'll start Batman and Robin. It's easy because I was working with, my idol. I mean, it's Frank Miller, and Frank is a great writer, but he's also a great storyteller and great artist. So every time I read a panel description, I immediately could visualize how he would handle it. And it would be this big, kind of bold, in your face, black and white image. And then I was like, but I can't do that because that's, they hired me, not Frank, to draw this. And then I'd almost have to consciously think of what I would, kind of put that away and do what I would do.
Right.
Which wasn't as good. But so there was a lot of like second guessing early on. But then once I got past that kind of initial kind of concern or hesitation, it got a lot freer and a lot more fun.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Do you have any closing thoughts, Kev?
Honestly, I do notice, and I wanted to say this, that you can tell by the way you still draw now and the work you do now that you're still super fired up to make comics. Yeah. And I think, and for someone who's been doing it as long as you have, that's a pretty big deal. When you think of the number of things you've drawn, it's thousands and thousands and thousands. And so to be able just to tell from looking at like a sketch you put on Instagram that like, no, you're still fired up. It's pretty awesome, and I think it's it's rare. It's rare in any art form for someone to still be that excited, and it's great. It's just great to see.
That's an extremely kind compliment. Thank you.
I'm a really good person. So.
Hey, Steve, before we go though, Steve, do you have your phone on you by chance?
I do. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to send you this. So I got this. I know, Steve. All right. Let's see if this goes through here. Did it go?
While we're waiting, Gary, do you want to say something?
Well, I was.
Anyway, so I know that. It went through.
Right. Was it via email or?
No, I sent you it via text. Oh no, it's still sending. All right, so go ahead if you have something.
I was going to ask Jim if you could do us a favor and draw Steve as a superhero, and his superpower was selling tickets at comedy clubs.
Okay, Gary.
That would be his.
Unbelievable. Gary actually posted a question on this thing on Facebook where everybody's asking these kind questions to Jim, and then Gary said to me, "My question is for you, Steve. Would you ever consider doing a sitcom?" Unbelievable.
Hey Jim, you know what you should do? You ever go down to like the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, and there's those guys there like designing the caricatures? Do you ever just like? You should just go right next to him, like draw your own, and then
just
be like,
ruin the lives of an
right. You should be like, here you go, bitch, and then just hand him a picture of something
Jim,
you've done.
This is sick, dude.
I have thought about that, but usually at Six Flags.
Oh, you do it at Six Flags?
Yeah, but no, those guys are really good.
The Disneyland people are legit good.
Yeah, and there's a whole different skill set of drawing likenesses. I'm not so good at that.
Yeah. Jim, thank you so much for drawing this. I just got the text.
Oh,
this is unbelievable. That is so awesome.
It's not quite done. Still some details. I was doing it while we're talking.
Well, I have to tell you, my son, his name is Kent, actually. But you put something there. But I named my son Kent. After...
I thought you said you named him Clark.
Well, no, I named him Kent. But I think you could. I don't know if you can, but I named him Kent because I grew up as such a huge fan of the original 70 of the Richard Donner film, And Christopher Reeve just embodied everything about Midwestern principles and the way I feel like a man should conduct himself. And for me, when I was growing up selfishly, and I feel like such a nerd saying this, but I feel like it's the proper venue to say this. As much as I love Superman, Clark Kent was always the bigger hero to me because he was able to do all these things, and it was suppress those things, and just he was the foil to Superman. I don't know. To me, Kent embodies everything that is American, and I appreciate it. And I can't even begin to thank you for drawing that. That is
no. I haven't done the whiteout yet. Like I said, it's not finished. So that's an easy correction, and then I'm going to put the nerd glasses back on him and a necktie, and then it'll be.
No. This is unbelievable because Superman is everywhere, all over my house. Actually, in my garage because my wife makes me put it out there. But Superman everywhere. I love.
Thank you later. Like, oh, you could have gotten me a drawing of a reporter, but instead you got me a drawing.
No. My son is named after this mythological character that is such a part of Americana, and you are as revered, I believe, as any of these comic book heroes that we look up to. And I cannot thank you enough for the time you took to spend with us, especially knowing you're under the weather. I just, on behalf of all the fans, we love your work. Thank you so much. And
hey, thank you guys.
We can't thank you enough, Jim. Get better soon, pal.
All right. Take care.
Thank you,
Take
Jim.
care, buddy.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Bye now.
Bye.
You got to tell the audience what this is. I mean, because
so
this
Jim,
is great.
Maybe 2 years ago, he came to the set of Sullivan and Son, and he actually watched the show. Being Korean, he actually did watch the show, and so he came to the set, hung out, took pictures with everybody, and he gave me a copy of Hush, and he drew a sketch of Batman in it, and I got to my car and I was staring at it for a good 10 minutes. And then he just sent me a text of a picture he drew for my son. And it is Superman busting out of the chains. And like literally a single tear is going to come out of my eyes. It's just unbelievable knowing that, just even as a guy that goes to the comic book stores on Wednesdays and you pick up his titles, and then to know that he was kind enough to do something like that even for my kid is just unbelievable.
Funny. I mean, you look
what
at
a great
just how
guy.
creative he is. I mean, just like with his hands, and then you look at you, and your hands are covered in lotion. So I mean, it's just like this guy.
That is just
Gary,
just took it
you're
through
great.
an
You're
awful
great
place.
at ruining things.
Oh,
like,
really?
Your superpower is if you had a comic book, it'd be the ruiner of moments.
Good. God, Gary.
Sorry about that single tear.
You
We'll edit this out.
Remind me so much of the Holocaust that it's uncanny.
Never again.
Hey, listen, don't yell at me because nobody's listening to your podcast.
Oh, God, Gary, you are the worst. Well,
To yell at you, I'd have to go to your basement, so I don't know how to even do that.
Well, why did this turn ugly all of a sudden at the last minute?
you did this.
Which warm-ups did you look up to growing up?
You did this, dude.
I would just like to say that Jim Lee legit changed my life as a young person. Like, for real. Like, I picked up those comics and was like, wait, I want to be one of these dudes.
Yeah. Well, we talked comics before at the Comedy Store, Kevin, you and I.
Yeah.
And the minute that Jim committed to this, I said I got to get Kevin on because I knew as a comedian and as an artist, you would appreciate this. So that is the end of the Gentleman's Dojo here today. We got to thank our good pal, Kevin Christy. Kevin, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Kevin G. Christy. My podcast is called Occasionally Awesome. It's on the All Things Comedy Network. I'm also on the show Masters of Sex.
Awesome.
It's called Success, Gary. Look
Show's
it up.
coming up. Show's coming up.
It's called
Show's
Success.
I'll be at the Punchline December 28th and 29th.
He headlines.
Just the 2 nights.
He works.
Just the 2 nights. Is that a Tuesday, Wednesday? I'm going to be... I love those off nights.
You are the worst.
It's rare you meet a legitimately bad person.
Yeah, absolutely. At
Love
Canon
you,
Comedy,
Casey.
right?
This guy's good, man.
I still
Don't
believe
forget.
that. I still
Don't forget.
completely believe that.
Check him out on those off nights. He'll be co-featuring.
At Canon Comedy, All Things Comedy. Guys,
good stuff.
keep the reviews coming
Yep.
in on iTunes. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for
You
tuning in.
never answer the question if you're going to do a
What?
sitcom.
Fuck off, Gary.
All right.
That's it. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Co-featuring is so funny.